When was the last time, as an adult, you allowed yourself to do something childlike? Just something that made you feel like a kid, you know? Something where you're just having so much fun. So the reason I'm asking that question is the answer for me was last night. So people that know me super well know that, like, ever since I've been growing up in show business, I've been so fortunate. I've worked with most people that were posters on my wall, or got to have some sort of encounter, whether I recorded them or had a run-in with them. I've been extremely lucky. I don't have pictures of these moments. That's not what I do. That's not how I build relationships. And so, but for years, for 35 years, I've said, when asked, Rob, who do you want to meet? What's your thing? I've always said, without missing a beat, Cameron Crowe is the only guy in the entertainment business that I would care to meet. And selfishly, I'll always follow that with, I don't want to just meet him. I'd like to kind of have dinner with him. If I could give money to a charity or whatever. So that's kind of like been my stock answer. And I don't know. I love musicians. I think they're great. But there's something about this guy, Cameron Crowe, that I've always really identified with. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, I used to play music. That was kind of, I was in a band. I played drums, and that was my kind of entry into the music business. However, I'm a music fan. I'm a music fan first. I always have been. I usually have to disguise that fandom in a professional manner and cloth, if you will. But at the end of the day, I love music. I love how it makes me feel. I love how it can change someone's day. And that's why I've always identified with Cameron Crowe. For those of you guys that don't know, who is Cameron Crowe, okay? Cameron Crowe, life story is in a movie he wrote about his coming of age, called Almost Famous. He very famously went back to high school. He graduated 2 years early from high school. His mom skipped him ahead at a young age, and honestly, I don't think he was aware of it at the time. So at 15, he was graduated from high school. At 15, he called Rolling Stone magazine with a hot tip he had gotten that led to writing his first feature for Rolling Stone at 15. At 16, he went back to school kind of undercover and wrote a book called Fast Times at Ridgemont High about that experience. And that book became a movie. I think Amy Heckerling actually directed that movie. Cameron wrote the script. And the music in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, that soundtrack to Fast Times at Ridgemont High, I've played it obsessively nonstop. The movie opens with the Great Mall scene. I believe that was in Sherman Oaks. My friend Dean will set me straight if it's not. In the Go-Go's We Got the Beat comes on. Perfect song in 1982 for the perfect moment. Thus kind of setting the course, the landscape of cinema and music and Cameron Crowe. There's a coming of age, like, love scene in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Jackson Browne's, if you know what I'm talking about. Jackson Browne's Somebody's Baby happens right at that moment, right? It makes that scene. There's a scene where Phoebe Cates gets out of a swimming pool, right? A little fantasy montage, kind of drops her top. We all know the Cars moving in stereo is the song that's playing when that scene happens. It's iconic. He was doing this in 1982 with music at a super young age, and he has continued. That thread has woven through so many moments. Jerry Maguire, the use of Bruce Springsteen's Secret Garden. He cut a version for the video where he cuts clips in and out of that song Secret Garden. If you've never heard the Secret Garden edit with the dialogue from Jerry Maguire, do yourself a favor, find it on YouTube. To say he gets it is an understatement. And it's always music first. So I got to meet my hero, Cameron Crowe, last night. He's on a book tour for his autobiography called Uncool, which, that's a great line. He has a great website called The Uncool, but that's a great line from Almost Famous, where he's talking to his mentor, Lester Bangs, another writer for Rolling Stone. And he said, "You and me, we're not cool." And that kind of became Cameron's mantra, right? He's very freaking cool, but this uncool thing of getting the truth, distilling what's actually going on here, not getting caught up in the cool, right? I really identify with that. And so that use of music, Say Anything, that great shot where John Cusack raises the jam box above his head and In Your Eyes is playing. It's freaking great. Cameron did, so one of my questions, I got 5 minutes with him last night, which was a absolute gift. A gift. So I wanted to collect my thoughts because I've thought about this forever. And I didn't want to have stock questions. But one of the two things I wanted to talk about was Eddie Van Halen scored this movie, The Wildlife. And most people have never heard this music. They probably never heard of The Wildlife. It had Eric Stoltz. It had Sean Penn's brother, Chris Penn. And it's this great movie. My buddy Mark and his brother Eric had dubbed this on VHS, and I'd never heard of it. We used to watch it obsessively. It's your typical 80s teen movie, but so great for the time. So there's Eddie Van Halen music all over this, and a lot of the music that you hear became songs. You'll hear the melody from Right Now being played. You'll hear stuff from the 5150 record that was 10 years away from happening. And so I wanted to ask him, did he have something to do with that? Because he did not direct The Wildlife. I believe Art Linson did. But he had written the script and had a lot of leverage. And so I said, how did you get Ed Van Halen to do this? And he goes, it's interesting. We had a mutual friend. And he said, this movie was such a non-thing. No one was really thinking about the music. And Eddie did a piece called Ripley. And for those of you like me, Ripley was an instrumental song he wrote when Steve Ripley had made him a stereo Kramer guitar titled the Ripley. It had the ability to pan each string left or right. So Eddie did this instrumental piece for Ripley, and Cameron said, once we had that piece, that was kind of our proving ground, for the studio to see this crazy rock guy can, produce music. So my follow-up question though was, as awesome as that was, that you got Ed to do that, was it kind of a beautiful mess? Because for those of you that don't understand post-production and creating movie for film, that's no small feat, right? And it's really rare air people that can do that masterfully, and to have a rock band guy. So Cameron had great answers. He praised the great Don Landee, who engineered all the Van Halen stuff, and said, Don kind of kept the wheels on the track. And so that was a great angle. I was so happy that I had something like that ask. And then kind of a follow-up question was, I said, I've heard that you always play music on set in between takes. And I said, is that true? And he's like, oh, absolutely. And I said, I'm assuming you curate that. And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, I like to know all these actors. I like to know what music they like. And then within that artist catalog, I'm trying to set a mood before they do the scene. And he said, I'll be playing music right up until I say action. Music will be playing. And I'm like, man, that's so great. I've heard that, and I wanted to ask. And he goes, I've got a great story about that. He said, all the people that I've worked with, Tom Cruise, Kate Hudson, all these people, they seem to really like that. And my crew seems to really like it. There was only one time, he said, when that didn't work so well. And the great Philip Seymour Hoffman, they were doing Almost Famous. He came to set. Philip Seymour Hoffman in Almost Famous played the character Lester Bangs, who was Cameron's mentor at Rolling Stone. He did a freaking amazing job. But he said when Philip came to set, he looked at me and said, yeah, I've heard you played the music. What makes you think the music you're playing is better than the music I've got going on in my head before I do this scene? So Cameron very politely said he turned the music off. That seemed to be the only time, which I thought that was really generous for him to share just a great, honest story. Obviously, he respects him in his work, and he didn't throw shade. He just kind of said, hey, that's... And so I had a comeback that Cameron seemed to really like. I go, I guess when you can act that good, you get to act that way. And he liked that. And so anyway... I got to chat with him for about 5 minutes. It was a complete gift. But that thread I was talking about, to circle back, of Cameron's use of music, it sets the tone. Like the movie Elizabethtown, Ryan Adams, Come Pick Me Up, The Long Way Home, Patty Griffin. Orlando Bloom has a delicate relationship with his father, and his father passes, and he's going back to Kentucky to put his dad to rest. And this song, the long way home, is playing, and I remember thinking like, I have a complicated relationship with my dad. Great, but complicated. And I'll be making that drive one day, and I'm watching that movie, and I'll be damned if I, sure enough, didn't make that drive one day and had all those emotions that you could feel coming off the screen of that character. And I just feel like no one knows how to set up a scene better with music than Cameron Crowe. And Elizabethtown, if you haven't heard that soundtrack, check it out. It's unbelievable. Like every movie he did, and I'm missing probably so many. In Singles, I believe that was 92. We're in the heart of grunge. So Cameron had all the Seattle rockers contributing to a great soundtrack. That music really wasn't my jam. I could appreciate it, so I really can't speak to it with any authority. But man, last night he had great stories. He read a passage from his book. Sheryl Crowe, by the way, moderated. And, as far as people in Nashville, music people, I'm not sure he could have picked anyone better. She was reverent. She was well educated. And she brought out the first copy of Rolling Stone that had an Allman Brothers article. And Allman Brothers are on the cover. It's Cameron's breakout moment. I'm not sure she meant to give it to him. It appeared from the audience that she brought it out to show him, like, I have this. And he goes, I actually don't have a original copy of that. And she paused, and she was like, I want you to have it. I don't think that was the original intent, because at the end of the night, as they're wrapping up, she once again said, I want you to have this. And I love that she's the one that got to give that to him, because you could tell it meant so much. But the music fan in me was also sad for her, because I feel like maybe that was not her original intent. But anyway, it was great. I was in a room full of people I felt like that were just like me. You know, I was second row. I saw the man's eyes well up 20 times, like glassy eyed. And the whole room was doing that. And it just felt great to be in the presence of so many people that clearly his career and music means the same. So anyway, check out Cameron Crowe movies. You know, go down a rabbit hole, make a list. Hopefully you've seen Almost Famous. I feel like that's required watching for humanity. It's so good, and it's his life story. But Jerry Maguire, Vanilla Sky, We Bought a Zoo. It's kind of a later outlier. You know, he did a special, I think on Showtime, called Roadies. It's pretty good. My road people friends didn't like it. I didn't. It's one of the few things he's done that I didn't fully resonate with. But Fast Times, A Wildlife, Singles, I'm missing something right now. But anyway, Cameron Crowe. Circling back, it felt good to feel like a kid, a freaking kid that was happy. I don't know how I would top that moment, you know. And I bought like the VIP thing, right? Like, I've never done that, but this guy means so much to me. It's like I kept thinking my path would cross in what I do, what he does, and I live in Nashville. You know, I usually get to meet these folks, but I was so happy to be able to pay for the privilege to get the time. So anyway, maybe that is me encouraging you to do something this week that makes you feel like a kid. Life is good, friends. Enjoy every sandwich, as the late and great Warren Zevon once said. All right, have a great day.